It's been a year since the series Game of Thrones ended. I've watched most of the hot takes, and I've watched some rewrites of particular episodes or the end of the show. I liked a lot of them, but there are a few changes I desperately wanted that I just wasn't seeing. So now, when the world has long since moved on, I've finally written up how I would have wanted the series to play out. This video will simply go through the plot points I would have changed. I don't want to go back and forth between the change and the explanation of the change. And yes, this is a shitty PowerPoint. I don't have video editing skills or Photoshop skills. Sorry. If I don't mention a change, it will essentially play out as in the show. I've created a second video going into the reasons for my changes. Most rewrites begin with either Season 7 or Season 8, but I want to make a few important changes sooner. So first, at the end of Season 5, Ellaria and the Sand Snakes don't murder Myrcella. Also, Jaime doesn't go to Dorne, he goes to the Riverlands. When word of Tommen's death reaches Dorne, Ellaria assassinates Prince Doran, and Dorne sends out messages proclaiming that Myrcella is now the rightful queen of Westeros, as she would be under Dornish law. This is actually a bit closer to the book, in my opinion. No one playing the Game of Thrones thinks Myrcella is actually asserting a claim. It's unclear whether she even knows about it. Nor does anyone from Dorne send out an army to back up this claim, so it's possible they're just trolling Cersei with this, and they are quite successful if that's their goal. Skipping ahead a season to the Battle of the Bastards, I would have Ghost come back to Winterfell with Jon and Sansa. I would have Sansa tell Jon that she has sent word to Littlefinger and she hopes he'll come, but fears he will betray them. And Jon will not put any faith at all in what Littlefinger will do. So they debate how long to wait for him and the Vale's armies, and in the end their hand is essentially forced when Ramsay brings out Rickon and taunts Jon, drawing him onto the field. As he rides out, Jon orders Ghost to protect Sansa during the battle, and when the battle turns in their favor, with Littlefinger's help, Sansa tells Ghost he can join in. Legends spread around the camp about the enormous white wolf streaked red with blood. At the end of this season, I would keep Lyanna Mormont's speech mostly the same, but have her nominate Sansa to rule the North instead of Jon, valuing legitimacy over gender. One by one, the other lords pledged themselves and their houses to Sansa of House Stark, until the great hall of Winterfell rings with the cry, "The Queen in the North." My changes to Seasons 7 and 8 are more significant, so I'll take them episode by episode. In Episode 1, at Winterfell, Sansa names Jon Snow her hand and Brienne the commander of her Queensguard. Littlefinger declares that the Vale recognizes Sansa as queen as well. Arya still kills Walder Frey and his sons, but spares his daughters. One of them is the wife of Edmure Tully, and she immediately frees him. The Frey women are too beaten down to consider claiming the keep for themselves, and Edmure is quickly named Lord of the Twins. He sets about reclaiming the Riverlands for House Tully. In Episode 2, Sansa names Jon as her emissary to treat with Dany. He leaves Ghost behind with Sansa. Arya learns that Sansa and Jon are at Winterfell and turns north. She encounters Nymeria and a large wolf pack. Arya begins to cry. She apologizes to Nymeria for sending her away, wishing yet again she could explain. Nymeria approaches, and after a tense moment, licks Arya's face. As their bond renews, the feral grip of what they had to do to survive loosens in both of them. Nymeria and most of the wolf pack join Arya and continue north together. In Episode 3, the initial meeting between Jon and Dany is about the same, even though he's here as Sansa's hand, not as king. Dany takes her dragons and destroys Euron's fleet, who were on their way to King's Landing, killing Euron and freeing Yara. With Euron dead, Yara sees an opening in Pike and tells Dany she will reclaim Pike in Dany's name and then come with more Ironborn to help take King's Landing. Bran reaches Winterfell. In Episode 4, Arya, Nymeria, and the other wolves also reach Winterfell. Ghost and Nymeria approach each other warily, and people brace for a horrific fight. Instead, they recognize each other as siblings and greet each other affectionately. Ghost, as the runt of the litter and alone rather than a big pack, behaves submissively to his sister. For the Watchers, the enormous she-wolf arriving with her own followers, and Ghost, the wolf they know, the wolf they've seen fight, being submissive towards her reinforces mythology around the righteousness of their new queen. Bran startles Arya by asking if she sees through Nymeria's eyes, and she realizes that she has, she just didn't realize what she was seeing. Nymeria makes Sansa emotional and remember Lady. In the Godswood, she pets Nymeria and apologizes to Arya for not standing up to Joffrey years ago. They agree to tell each other everything. Dany does not attack the Lannister army, but because the Iron Fleet was destroyed, Cersei's only marginally in a better position than she was in the show. In the 5th episode, when Arya finds the letter that Littlefinger planted for her to find, she goes to Sansa immediately. They speculate about Littlefinger's motives and decide to feign distrust in public. It should be a cat-and-mouse game returned to over the season as they try to figure out his intentions and whether their act is convincing him. Arya is learning to warg Nymeria. She can't be beside Sansa in person with their act, so walks beside her as a wolf. Ghost also stays close to Sansa as he was commanded to by Jon. Sansa's royalty is reinforced by the huge wolves at her side. The subplot about catching a white is completely gone. Completely gone. Jon tells Dany that Sansa and the North will bend the knee to her. He doesn't have authority to do this, but he sees no other way to have Dany agree to focus on the true threat. In the 6th episode, Yara finds Theon and a few other Ironborn who escaped when Euron took her captive. They had been planning a mission to rescue her, but since Dany's dragons destroyed Euron's fleet, this path to redemption isn't available, and they're treated with scorn. Yara is forced to publicly punish them for their cowardice, because if she didn't, she'd lose the respect of her followers. But after a public flogging, one in which Theon's scars are mocked as more evidence of his weakness, they are allowed to rejoin the fleet as foot soldiers. They retake the Iron Islands. The people there refuse to pledge to Dany and vote for Yara as their queen outright. Yara is worried that Dany will think she's been betrayed, but this is what Yara wants, so she accepts. Edmure declares the Riverlands' allegiance to Sansa. He doesn't have the military strength to claim the Iron Throne for himself. Supporting Sansa, who's a Tully as much as a Stark, makes bannermen there more likely to support him. Cersei is busy working to plant rumors that the Dragon Queen sent assassins to destroy the High Sept, and that Dany doesn't even believe in the Seven. She seizes Tyrell assets within King's Landing and begins distributing them to the masses. She orders Qyburn to make more wildfire as fast as possible, and she orders her guards to be ready to bring her children to use as human shields. In the final episode of Season 7, Dany still attacks Cersei's forces and food supply, but Jaime isn't in the battle. Neither is Bronn. Cersei's forces wound Viserion enough to bring him down and converge on him, ultimately killing him, though many give their lives in the process. Between Viserion on the ground and the other dragons, they kill all of Cersei's soldiers that they can see. Just a few survive by pretending to be dead, and a lot of luck. Cersei needs time to finalize the loan and hire the Golden Company. She's also intercepted a message from Dorne intended for Sansa, suggesting an alliance. So Cersei is the one who suggests the ceasefire to confront the army of the dead, with separate but coordinated military camps. The negotiations are not held in person, but by Raven. Even more surprising, she proposes that as the house where the battle will occur, the overall commander and strategist should be Lady Sansa. Cersei names Jaime to head her contribution to the army and to go ahead to plan strategy and prepare the camp for the main part of her army. Sansa names Brienne to coordinate her contribution to the army. Dany names Jorah, and they head for Winterfell. Pike is also informed of this development by both Cersei and Dany. Yara sends a small company of soldiers plus Theon. She hopes Theon can convince Dany that Yara hasn't double-crossed her. Littlefinger is clearly shown listening as Sansa and Arya discuss eliminating him. He quietly exits the castle with a few horses and guards. Cersei talks to Jaime before he leaves and tells him of course she won't be following through and sending her army north. She's hard at work using the dragons as propaganda. Cersei will protect people from the dragons, and if there are actually other monsters from beyond the wall, which she doubts, she'll defeat them too. Besides, if nothing else, this gives her time to bring more food from Highgarden and for the Golden Company to arrive. Disgusted, Jaime decides to go north anyway. In camp that night, the guard on watch kills Littlefinger as he sleeps, slitting his throat. He leaves the other guard, who is sleeping, alone with the body, and leads a horse some distance from camp before mounting. He raises his hand to his face and peels it away, revealing that it was actually Arya. She turns the horse back towards Winterfell. Through sheer numbers, the dead break through the wall and pour into Westeros. At this point, headed into the final season, there are 5 people claiming some or all of Westeros: Dany, Cersei, Sansa, Myrcella, and Yara. So future historians will say that the War of the 5 Kings was followed by the War of the 5 Queens. Okay, the final season. Dany, her army, and Jon arrive at Winterfell. Sansa doesn't come outside to meet them, so Dany is forced to go inside without her dragons. She sees Sansa on the throne at the center of the room. Ghost sits to her right, between her and the empty chair that Jon would occupy as her hand. Arya sits to her left, with Nymeria between them. Other wolves from the pack and the people of the north ring the room, and the people do not look particularly happy to see Dany. Sansa welcomes them and makes no mention of her claim to be Queen of the North, instead rushing into a welcome feast. Jon stands and says plainly before all assembled that Dany is the rightful queen over all of Westeros and that they should all bend the knee. He also argues that this is the best way to defeat the dead. The northern listeners don't like this at all, and Sansa appeals to the rules of hospitality. Dany has eaten bread and salt at her table. Surely the matter of the north can wait? Dany is furious, but reluctantly concedes, for now. Jon rides Rhaegal, but doesn't feel ready to ride the dragon into battle. The Bronn assassination subplot is gone. In the second episode, 3 soldiers freeze to death in the night. Jaime arrives and chooses to quarter with Sansa's troops. We see preparations for the battle, including Sansa and other civilians practicing basic self-defense moves. Theon passes his sister's message to Dany and then asks Sansa if he can fight for her, as in the episode. Dany and Sansa don't have the candid conversation because Sansa is avoiding a confrontation with the Dragon Queen. Sansa also names Lord Manderly as her hand, since she can't really keep Jon in that position now. Jon is awkwardly splitting his time between Winterfell proper and Dany's camp. In the Battle of Winterfell, many, many more characters die. Jorah, Lyanna, and Beric, as in the show. Theon still dies defending Bran, but not in a random charge, in defense when he's completely overwhelmed by whites. The Night King creates fog, and in the chaos, Rhaegal is killed. Arya takes a face from her bag of faces and can get close enough to kill a walker and take its face. In the crypt, they'd exhumed and burned the old tombs. However, over the generations, it has been forgotten that dead are entombed in the walls themselves. Some of the rooms cave in as the dead step out from the walls and floor. Sansa and Tyrion actively, but not expertly, try to defend themselves. Also, Sansa's people rush to protect her, and Tyrion is helped by this, since he was by her side, but is still badly wounded. Once soldiers outside hear their cries, they rush to help. Still, many more people die, including Varys, Melisandre, and Missandei. No one finds Melisandre's body in the aftermath, but there is an old woman no one knows with a necklace, very much like hers. Most assume she used magic to spirit away, and reported sightings of the Red Woman continue for years. Sam's position is overwhelmed by whites, and he falls. So does Jon, and both are turned into whites by the power of the Night King. Arya is creeping towards the Night King's position, wearing a walker's face, when she sees Jon, his eyes supernaturally blue, raising his sword against a man he once commanded. Some small sound of horror and sorrow must escape her throat, because impossibly in the noise of the battle, he turns and faces her. Some kind of understanding passes between them, these 2 siblings who were always the closest to each other, even though one is disguised as the enemy, and the other should all rights be a shell, his mind and soul gone. They turn and stride side by side towards the Night King, the battle raging around them yet not touching them. The Night King laughs when he sees Jon with blue eyes, but that laugh turns into a scream of fury when Jon thrusts his sword through the Night King's abdomen, pinning him to a tree. Bran reaches back through time to channel the power from the Children of the Forest, from the day they made the others. Arya stabs the Night King with dragonglass. He shatters, This doesn't make all the others instantly die, but now when killed, they stay down and the dead stop rising. Jon's eyes turn from blue to their ordinary warm brown. He tries to speak but collapses. Arya removes the face of the walker. She strokes his hair and tells him it's okay, he can rest this time. He dies. Bran also seems badly injured, though they find no physical injury on him. He requests to be left alone in the Godswood, surrounded by the bodies of Jon, Theon, and others. There, he sees many visions. His mother, new to the north, crying. He sees Lyanna Stark, and stays with Maester Luwin while he dies. Later, when they return, Bran is gone. There is no body, and the face in the weirwood tree now seems to be his. The battle against the remaining whites and walkers continues as soldiers and horses fall. The tide of the battle has turned, but it is not yet over when the episode ends by cutting away to Cersei, drinking wine and watching as the Golden Company and elephants arrive. The image of King's Landing with its light and normalcy is obscene compared to the brutality of the battle we've just seen. And, with Sam, Bran, and Jon all gone, his parentage becomes moot. Dany and Sansa never even learn of it, and one possible history curls away into nothing. In episode 4, this time, Jaime stays with Brienne. Gilly speaks to Grey Worm about Missandei's courage. He doesn't remember anything of Sam to return any stories, but they share a moment. Night lasted as long as it needed to for the battle. Outside of the battle in the area of Winterfell, 3 days and nights went by during the fighting. Dany is rattled and distraught by all of her camp's losses, which she feels are heavier than Sansa's. Grey Worm and Drogon are all she has left. Sansa suggests they face Cersei together and then negotiate the north. Dany agrees, but insists that Sansa show her commitment to beating Cersei by coming south. Tyrion must stay behind in Winterfell. He lost more blood than anyone realized initially in the battle. An infection has taken root in his left arm, and he is fighting for his life. Sansa says she's leaving Arya home to watch Winterfell, but secretly Arya goes ahead to King's Landing in disguise. Ghost stays by Jon's funeral pyre for several days, but then turns south and shows up at the camp by Sansa's tent, lying down beside Nymeria. The wolves are treated with fear and reverence. In the 5th episode, a blizzard rages as the armies arrive outside King's Landing. There is no attempt at negotiation. In the night, Arya sneaks into the city and seeks out the mountain. In a fight that very much recalls his fight with Oberyn, she dances out of reach, jabbing and slicing. But Arya does not taunt the mountain or get distracted. Instead, she focuses on slicing off a piece of him at a time, bringing all the skills of a water dancer, of the faceless men, and of instruction from Sir Brienne. Some of the pieces of his body, stinking of death, are still moving when she uses a poker to push them into the fireplace. She watches without expression as the pieces catch fire and softly recites the names on her list that she personally killed. Walder Frey, Meryn Trant, the Mountain. She pauses, glancing upward as if she can see through the walls to the royal chamber, and says, Cersei Lannister. But her energy is spent from the battle. She will not cross off a second name tonight. In the morning, as Dany, her army, and her remaining dragon approach the city and swarm its walls, mass deposits of wildfire erupt, engulfing them and many civilians. Grey Worm is among the casualties. Dany sees the group he was part of vanish in green flame. She screams and encourages Drogon to blast fire with abandon as she flies him towards the center of the city. The city is covered with snow and ice, not as much as in the north, but enough for contrast between blue icicles and bursts of red and orange flame. She finds Cersei on the grounds in front of the palace, surrounded by women and children, a child on her lap. The child is crying and trying to get away, but Cersei ignores the girl and smiles coldly up at Dany. Dany cannot use dragonfire against Cersei without killing the child. She sees a young couple staring at the child behind some guards. She orders Drogon to set fire to the guards, and immediately, almost as if it was planned, the couple springs forward. The woman grabs a burning hot sword from one of the guards, but the man sprints directly to Cersei and wraps his hands around her throat. The woman is just a moment behind him, stabbing Cersei over and over. Other civilians rush at them, though it is unclear if all are joining in or some are trying to protect their queen. Drogon roars, and this disperses the mob, who shrink from him. The couple cradles their bruised child. Dany slides from Drogon's back and declares herself in all of her titles. She says she has come to liberate them, and she smiles generously at them, a proud royal vision in her clean white gown, her silver gold hair loose and perfect. This is not greeted with cheers. The people stare dully at Cersei's body. Then there is a shriek of terror. Drogon has taken one of the dead guards into his mouth, but disliking the taste of the armor, turns and sends a stream of dragon fire directly into the crowd. Many are killed, including the couple who killed Cersei and their child. Drogon bends to eat. Dany commands him to stop, but he ignores her. Dany looks around the plaza, white stone marred by blood and ash, and understands that a great dragon can conquer, but not rule, at least not rule as she wishes to. She takes up a sword. It feels strange in her hands. She has never used one, never needed one. She walks to Drogon's side. He would defend himself from anyone approaching his meal. Anyone but her. Through tears, she speaks to him in High Valyrian, saying, "My child, I'm so sorry." Then, in a motion both awkward and strong, she thrusts the sword through his eye socket, and into his brain. The dragon screams and thrashes, and sobbing, Dany forces the sword deeper. A brave soldier of the city charges with a longsword into the dragon's other eye. As Brienne and her company enter the plaza, Brienne's sword raised, they see Dany lying astride the unmoving dragon, hugging its neck, her eyes empty. King's Landing has fallen to her, and the tyrant is dead. But her children, her friends, and lovers, all of them are gone. She has won everything and lost everything. She cannot stand or speak. Brienne sheaths her sword and orders that the army medics be called, all of them, now. In the final episode, it begins and is still deep winter. Cersei's head is on a pike on the city walls, icicles forming on it. Sansa's forces begin to clean the city and summon the great houses of the realm to account. Dany is taken to a healer. It is difficult to say whether she's in custody. Tyrion arrives along with the other lords. He has only one arm. Ultimately, the lords decide to send Dany to Harrenhal with a rotating set of guards from different houses. They hope to access the holding's wealth while avoiding its rumored curse. Brienne will be among the initial group of guards. Some people do declare allegiance to Dany and follow her there, especially some people who saw her kill her dragon for them, but their numbers remain small. Drogon's head is boiled and the skull is displayed in the city, to be later removed to the castle cellars with the others. Qyburn is beheaded. Sansa is pronounced Queen of the North, Riverlands, and Vale. Myrcilla is pronounced Queen Regent of Dorne. Ellaria smiles. Yara is acknowledged as Queen of the Iron Islands. With Jaime's support, Tyrion is pronounced Lord of the Westerlands and Casterly Rock. They will take Cersei's body there to be interred. Jaime and Brienne speak of meeting back in Winterfell once their duties at Harrenhal and Casterly Rock permit, but it's clear that neither is completely certain that Jaime will follow through. A few houses do try to claim King's Landing, but no one gets enough support. Sansa suggests that it be designated as a special neutral territory for houses to share in the port and hold meetings. The group doesn't like the idea, but can't agree to an alternative, so ultimately agree. At least for now. The city will be given a manager without trueborn or natural heirs, and Davos will be its first manager. The city will be protected by a selection of the Old Night's Watch, Dany's army, and Cersei's Queensguard. The Iron Throne was created with dragonfire and cannot easily be destroyed. The maesters in Old Town will be asked to consider the problem. As Sansa Stark and her army depart the broken city, Arya sees a bit of green emerging from the snow. It seems impossible that the winter could be so short, but they speculate the Night King had made winters unnaturally long. They look at each other, and it's clear they're both thinking of their family's motto. But without saying the words, they turn their horses' heads north. The Iron Throne sits empty, the room dark. The last shot of the show is of Nymeria and then Ghost, trotting after them. So, if you're curious about my reasoning and why I made the story choices I did, please check out my other video. I'll repeat myself as little as possible. Thanks for watching!